Chapter 42 to 48. It was a rather anticlimactic end to the most feared professor at Hogwarts other than Dumbledore. Baiting him into a confrontation on Harry's home ground and then destroying his willpower with the hard facts of his oxygen-thieving existence made it a breeze to capture his mental avatar. Harry turned it into a holodisk and duplicating all its memories took only seconds. Coming out of his mindscape to see Snape still reeling from the failure of his mind probe allowed him to easily hit him with a stunner and strip him of anything that may help him escape. Seeing his wrinkly balls was a small price to pay to make sure he was not hiding a portkey that could alert Dumbledore to Harry's true nature. A dive into the jumbled mess that made up Snape's worthless existence had Harry facing a multitude of memories that were either fake or not relevant, like reading the newspaper over breakfast. Since he already had a complete copy of Snape's entire mind, this type of defense became useless, even if it was an automatic response because Snape was unconscious. Harry started destroying everything in sight. From treasured childhood memories of Lily to potion recipes, he cared not what they were as long as he made it to Snape's center. Surprisingly, the continual destruction of Snape's mind must have jolted him awake because the memory bombardment was quickly halted, and the ghostly image of Severus, the petty tyrant, Snape appeared. What is the meaning of this, Potter? How dare you invade my mind? How are you even able to? Snape demanded, so confused by the event he blurted out 2 questions while expressing his outrage. Weird, does my avatar now look like Harry Potter? Could it be because I swore a magical oath that my name was Harrison Chad Peverell and that all contracts must use my full name? Did it somehow change my perception of myself to now look like my current body? Harry thought to himself, so many questions at Snape's reaction had him zone out for a couple of seconds. But he quickly regained his focus. To act carefree in another's mind was a foolish thing to do. Of course you would not know how I am here, after all. I captured your avatar after your failed attempt to mind me. Your last thought would be casting the Legilimens spell. Harry replied to Snape's mostly rhetorical questions. Impossible. You are only a child that just found out he is a wizard. Yeah, about that. I already explained that to your avatar and can't be bothered going through it again. Surrender, or I will turn you into a drooling dunderhead, incapable of wiping your own arse. Said Harry offhandedly. He had no intention of doing so, but after his earlier rampage through Snape's mind, it was a genuine possibility if he continued. Not that Snape knew he already copied all his memories and could add them back. Or that Harry could just modify the captured avatar and release it back into Snape's erased mind. Knowing that Snape would never voluntarily surrender, he used the momentary bewilderment his reply caused to throw out some attacks. Although Harry had copied all of Voldemort's techniques and skills, he had very little actual fighting experience. This would be a perfect time to get some practice as Snape was actually a competent duelist. What followed was a frenzied dogfight that would have seen Harry lose if it was not in a mindscape because the attacks only weakened his mental projection/representation. Since he would be under the scrutiny of the wizarding world, Harry decided to fight like a wand wizard and only use well-known, light or neutral, spells that even Dumbledore would not be able to complain about. Even weakened as he was, Snape managed to actually come close to winning until Harry stopped fooling around and unleashed his full powers on the unsuspecting bully. It had been a valuable training experience, but he was not stupid enough to put himself in danger for it like some idiot Chinese cultivator protagonist. The different dodging and dueling stances, coupled with alternating chains of various spells and counterspells from Voldemort's memories, made a rookie like him nearly Snape's equal. Even if he was already mentally weakened from his failed mind probe that saw part of his soul captured. But Snape's vastly superior experience at wizard dueling thanks to his Death Eater days, saw him slowly gaining the upper hand. Since that was the case, Harry just ked him up by summoning Enclave power armor soldiers to attack him while he blasted Snape with waves of area effects spells aimed at his feet so he couldn't dodge them. Harry didn't even give a Bond villain speech after slaughtering Snape, he just erased everything in his mind when he captured his mental hub. He then retreated back to his own mindscape to alter the captured avatar's memories. His earlier idea had been a stroke of genius as Snape at the moment was like a newborn child straight out of the uterus. Anything he added or deleted would be branded on the clean slate that was now Snape's soul. Wait a second. Did that mean that is also wiped out any magical oaths? Harry suddenly thought. He quickly scanned the newly captured thoughts for the oaths or contracts that the idiot made to Voldemort and Dumbledore. It turned out that there was only the slave seal or dark mark from Voldemort, but Dumbledore made him swear a magical oath when he went groveling to him to save the Potters. It was a basic loyalty pledge concealed within the denouncing of his Death Eater ways and obsession-driven promise to protect Lily. It was nothing that Snape would have immediately protested against, but after Lily died, it was changed automatically to protecting Harry under Dumbledore's guidance. This did not mean he had to be helpful or anything to Harry Potter, only keep him alive. His malicious bullying campaign against the ignorant, shy orphan boy was proof of that. There was literally no reason for it other than Snape's hatred of James Potter, and the bitterness of Lily's death coupled with having to keep the Potter spawn alive. His views on that could easily be seen by how he begged Voldemort to spare Lily but not her child. Not even Slytherin camouflage was a good enough reason for his over a decade campaign of traumatizing children. Really, Voldemort fell straight for the self-fulfilling prophecy trap that 99% of all completed prophecies reveal. Snape should have advocated for the capture of Lily and her child while killing off Potter. After a quick brainwashing, Severus Snape would have been the new Potter regent after marrying Lily and could raise Harry to be Voldemort's most avid follower. He could have got everything he ever wanted. But no, the idiot had to *CK everything up and railroad himself into the most miserable existence he called his life, a child-hating potions teacher in the place where all of his most hated memories and traumas took place. Harry found it hilarious that Snape caused all his own detrimental predicaments and thought the best way to fix them was by terrorizing a child while doing his best to keep the child alive so he could continue to torment him. Regardless of Snape's stupidity, Harry saw no physical or magical evidence of an oath other than a faded dark mark branded on his soul. But that was a different can of worms that was important since Harry could use it for his own purposes thanks to Voldemort's knowledge. There was no sign of the magical promise to Dumbledore, so he could only leave it for now and test it out later on wizards that would not be missed if they died. Since the oath revolved around him anyway, he could just cut Dumbledore out of the picture and have Snape become a triple agent. After he was done modifying the Avatar, Snape was now dedicated to doing everything he could for the child of his beloved. Though Harry had to call his house elves to reclothe him before waking him up. Stripping him in the first place was already a memory he wanted to erase, let alone adding that experience to it. Severus would now happily jump in front of a killing curse to save Lily's child, the only remaining part of her and the reason for his continual existence. He had met with Harry to talk about their misunderstanding in class. The subsequent discussion unearthed Dumbledore's manipulations and solidified his need to protect Harry and become a spy for him against Dumbledore and Voldemort. A few words of how Slytherin it was of Potter to try and blackmail him, but then apologized when it didn't work, would hopefully be enough for the little snakes to give him some grudging respect and leave him be. Of course, if they tried to get even for any imagined slight, he would put them down, hard. It was a shame that Harry couldn't confirm the process of erasing magical oaths by wiping a soul of all its thoughts and then inserting modified memories back onto it as a viable method. But for now, he was happy that he had Snape working for him and that it would keep the Slytherins off his back. Only 10 minutes had passed since he first teleported to the potion class, but he had spent a couple hours in Mindscapes playing with memories or trashing Snape for fun. The time difference was just one more reason why occlumency was overpowered and why wizards had grown weak. House Elf traveled back to where he disappeared after dinner, saw him making his way back to his room. He didn't want to give the magical portraits too many clues about his activities through his movements. He would not be seen walking back and forth trying to find the room of requirements when he could just appear inside it thanks to his faithful minions teleporting him. Although, leaving so he could change the room would require him becoming invisible or moving portraits. For Harry, the hardest thing about Hogwarts was moving around undetected. Keeping his movements free from the prying eyes of the students or the headmaster was more of a chore than the ridiculous homework assignments they received. Honestly, why did he need to write a foot of lines explaining the importance of wand movements when he could do it wandless? Sure, he had to keep it a secret or risk having even more scrutiny, and it was essential to train the idiot children's minds, but it was grating on his adult intelligence. Especially with his enhanced memory, thanks to occlumency. He had a new appreciation for spies that went undercover and stuck to their unique identities, pretending to be a child while only showing enough talent to beat Hermione was exhausting. Still, the worthless assignments were starting to get on his nerves just as much as not being able to explore the castle without ghosts, students, or paintings following his every move was. Even though there was not a rush to examine Hogwarts for all of its treasures, it irked him that he was so restrained. It had been 2 weeks since he had bound Snape as his most loyal protector and he had yet to even check out the room of requirements. All it would take was for one of his house elves to teleport him directly there, but his room kept having constant visitors thanks to his reputation skyrocketing from taking down Snape. Since there was no rush, he had shelved his plans and continued instead to build his public persona of a tolerant, friendly, and approachable, yet distant loner that was willing to help those that asked. He needed just the right balance that would keep all walks of wizarding life happy, from the traditional purebloods to the ignorant muggle-born. Harry thought that he was doing well because after his run-in with Snape, he only had to beat down 2 third-year students before Slytherin left him alone. Malfoy had even contacted him for the pure blood history lesson they had talked about, and boy was that enlightening. It seems that Snape had done quite well in appeasing the Slytherin's anger. This was done by, quoting, that Potter had shown rather remarkable Slytherin traits and confessed that he would have chosen Slytherin for his house if he was not ignorant of their world and needed to commit all his time to rectify it. When Draco had met him on Sunday, 2 days after the incident, for his lesson on pure blood traditions, he had excitedly regurgitated his head of house's speech and warning to stay clear of Potter. "Did you really threaten to alienate the whole of Slytherin to the wizarding world by claiming my godfather was training us to attack you?" Draco blurted out as soon as they were behind the closed door of an empty classroom. Seeing that Draco was more intrigued than angry, Harry couldn't help but show off a bit. "Well, he did publicly align himself against me for the second time unprovoked and then had all of your house staring daggers at me. So I merely mentioned how it would look if I called my 3 good friends the Minister of Magic, the head of the DMLE and Rita Skeeter to inform them of his behavior. The fact that he is most likely a marked Death Eater would just be the icing on the cake." Draco's eyes bulged at the implications. The hero of the wizarding world was being attacked unprovoked by the whole of Slytherin House on the head of house's orders. Even his quite limited 11-year-old mind still managing to wrap around the fact that it would be disastrous if that news got out. Draco Malfoy might be just as impulsive like any other child, but he had learnt enough from his father to see how that story would go, especially if his godfather was an unknown Death Eater that escaped a trial. "And he just let you go without punishment? Not even a detention?" Draco asked in disbelief. "We came to an agreement. Any hate Snape had for me was because of my father, and after I so blatantly blackmailed him, we decided to call a truce. I would not provoke him and be on my best behavior, and he will not judge me for my father's mistakes. He also had to remove any resentment our disagreement might have caused in your housemates. Don't want to automatically pit myself against Slytherin after I chose Ravenclaw to stay away from that bullsh *T, got enough on my plate without adding schoolyard fights into it. Already had to beat sense into 2 third years." Harry explained. After a bit more back and forth, Harry gained an in-depth look of Draco Malfoy's political and world views. It explained a lot of why he acted the way he did in canon after Harry rebuffed his friendship. The 11-year-old's clumsy attempt at making friend had backfired spectacularly and forced him into an antagonistic relationship to regain his honor for the slight. The spoiled child had not even noticed that Harry Potter was ignorant of the wizarding world's politics and had accidentally made himself look like a bully to a victimized child instead of a confident noble heir. That first meeting had locked the two into opposing sides, especially with the encouragement from Dumbledore's plant, Ron, the bigot, Weasley. No purebloods other than the Weasleys ever made an effort to even talk to Potter after Ron had so thoroughly isolated him. The reed-headed bigot had destroyed any chance of any political alliances with other pure-blood families with his brainwashing that they were all Muggle haters that treated Muggleborns like servants. Of course, he wasn't too far from the truth, but he had prevented any assistance that could have made his life so much easier. Draco continued to fill Harry in on everything he needed to know that would help him become a pure-blood elitist from a child's point of view. When they parted ways, Harry thought that he had made a good impression on Draco that would allow for positive future interactions. But while most of what Draco had to say was valuable information on the relationships between the noble houses, a lot was just regurgitated propaganda that his father had forced into him. Harry wondered how Narcissa had let Lucius get away with the *T he filled Draco's head with. She was rumored to be a smart witch after all. Having the child of an imperious Death Eater shouting mudblood at the top of his voice every chance he got was not a smart move. If Harry decided to make the young heir into a minion, he would need to curb the child's behavior before he tarnished himself as an evil Slytherin or a junior Death Eater. Harry was undecided how he was going to play out the next several years and had been agonizing over it in his spare time for the last couple of weeks. He had heaps of ideas but was hesitant to pick a path. He could either reintroduce Voldemort and Moonlight as him in the dark, terrorizing the Ministry while playing the boy who lived and savior in the light to take over the Ministry and introduce laws to legally enslave the whole of Wizarding Britain. Or he could befriend the heirs of prestigious noble houses and take over by his already blinding reputation when the next Minister of Magic election happened. After all, he was not on any time limit, and his only goal was to destroy Dumbledore's reputation. Harry just wanted to do it from a position of power so he could snatch up all the benefits that would come with the fall of the Lord of Light. Otherwise, he could just start Skeeter writing all of Dumbledore's dubious history while exposing incidents that the headmaster covered up. That reminded him, now that Quirrell wasn't here and being his annoying stuttering self, there would be no troll incident to save Hermione from. Oh well, it was not like it was vital to befriend the isolated and ridiculed know-it-all, with how she was acting. He thought to himself. Harry realized that they were only children, but he didn't remember being that stupid when he was 12. Hermione was bullied in the Muggle world and had treated this as an opportunity to make new friends. Then she goes about it by being a teacher's pet and patronizing all her peers with her memorized knowledge. Her social skills were non-existent, and Harry could only blame her parents for raising her as an ignorant SJW. Who goes into a new culture/community to make friends only to turn around and judge it by the society she left because they hated her. It was typical SJW mentality to leap at any chance to be seen as a woke hero by jumping into a situation without knowing all the information. The fact that she organized a campaign to free the Hogwarts house elves against their will was just one example of her unwanted social justice. It even left the house elves hating her. As annoying as Hermione Granger was, the fact of the matter was that she would grow up hot and she was a hard worker. Harry could use her as the head of his Muggle-born faction that would be fighting for their rights while he entrapped them in magical contracts to protect them. Really, Harry was going to use the next few years to play around while slowly maneuvering the wizarding world into a dead end. He just had to choose how to do it. It would also have the added benefit to allow me to engineer a few situations so I could point out wizard stupidity while giving Bond villain speeches to the people that annoyed me. Having the chance to laugh in his enemies' faces was too tempting to ignore. Holy shit. Did I really just think that? I sounded like a 2-bit villain that disregards the evil overlord list only to get caught by those damn meddling kids. Has the ambient magic of Hogwarts started to affect me? Harry thought to himself in rising horror. That was the kind of thinking that would see him exposed and caught. Hell, it was how Voldemort acted. Harry was completely sure it was not from any influence from the soul pieces he had consumed, as he had erased every bit of personality from them before he absorbed them. No, it had to be from the saturated environment of Hogwarts itself. He had felt the magical saturation as soon as he had entered the protective wards, and it had made him feel alive and welcomed. Could this be the reason why 99% of wizards were retarded? Could prolonged exposure to magic-rich environments be the cause of the rapid decline of original thought and critical thinking? Did it lower inhibitions and make young wizards a slave to their desires? Did puberty and developing minds just cement the process? So many questions flashed through his head that would need to be investigated. After all, wizards before Hogwarts were powerful and were capable of incredible feats. They practically invented everything that was used today. Their culture was even years ahead of the Muggle society. Then, after schools were founded around the world, and it became mandatory to attend magical boarding school, the magical society stagnated, and no new spells were created. Hell, a lot of them were even banned. Even the Dark Lords were not exempt from stupidity. If Grindelwald had used the Imperious Curse or brainwashed the Allied leaders before kicking off WW2, he would have conquered the entire world. But instead, he and Hitler had stupidly tried to take on everyone at once and had inevitably been defeated. Was Chad just not infected with wizard stupidity until now because he had an **LT mind in a child's body? Practically all children were isolated from magic until they turned 11 and then were exposed to a magically saturated environment while their personality and minds developed in their teenage years. Could he have just stumbled upon the reason wizards and witches were so backward? Even Muggleborns like Hermione entered with new ideas and were heralded as geniuses only to finish school brainwashed and missing any critical thinking. Her choices in hunting for Horcruxes were what the average wizard would have done, blindly charging into the situation while firing off schoolyard spells. Not once did she sit back and think like a Muggle, using every tool at her disposal. Harry would have to observe himself carefully for any further signs of corruption. He could not afford to act like a retard. With his new hypothesis behind wizards' lack of reasoning, a lot of Dumbledore's so-called plans made much more sense for their stupidity. The man had practically spent his entire life at Hogwarts. To announce to every student that there was a life-threatening danger behind almost no protection would see him harshly spanked by the Ministry if they ever found out. Even now, Harry could feel the euphoric touch of magic as he hurried to his room so he could have a meltdown. He would need to invent an undetectable method to isolate himself from its addicting yet damaging touch, maybe something like the bubblehead charm. It took Harry a week to perfect a way to isolate himself from Hogwarts' ambient magic that was both sustainable and unnoticeable unless looked for. Just flaring his magic out like an aura did the trick, but would have everyone staring at him in awe and disbelief as his presence pressured them. In the end, he incorporated the idea of the bubblehead charm, his aura, and the shield and disillusionment charm into one spell. The bubblehead charm gave him a constant supply of uncontaminated oxygen. The slight use of his aura protected him from influence just enough to not affect those nearby. The shield charm tied it all together and solidified it around his entire body. The disillusionment charm targeted the shield, making it invisible. It was complicated to combine all the parts, but once he did and memorized how it felt and acted, it was then a simple matter of using his considerable willpower to enact the final product whenever he chose. The hard part came when he had to train himself to subconsciously keep it active. In the end, even with his mental prowess, it was much easier to make it last for an hour when it was cast and then just reapply it when it timed out. Harry would have to shield his bed for when he slept, but that was still much easier than training himself to keep spells active while sleeping. Not to mention that isolating a stationary target from outside interference was child's play compared to adapting it into a charm to cover a moving human target. The week it took to implement his new protections had kept him paranoid of all his decisions and actions, making him triple-check all of his choices before acting. After they were in place, he went over all of his actions after he had entered Hogwarts and evaluated them objectively. He did not like what he observed. He acted like a child on a sugar high and was not subtle at all about it. He had blatantly defied the Dark Lord in front of everyone and then did the same to Snape, purely because his own ego would not allow himself to look weak. Fair enough, he got away with it, and it was satisfying to give them a nice hard metaphorical slap to their faces. Still, the consequences were gaining everybody's attention and alerting the Dark Lord to his real personality. There were no significant changes to personality or anything, but all of those out-of-character choices happened the first week he entered Hogwarts. Hell, it was in the first hour that he felt the need to throw down with the Dark Lord. Imagine what he would be like after 7 years of Hogwarts eroding his reason and inhibitions. He would probably start acting like Hitler and attacking everyone at once because he was sure of his superiority. Luckily, he caught the problem early. Even though he had made a few slight mistakes that now had Dumbledore watching him closely, Harry had already accounted for this situation before coming to Hogwarts anyway. It was the seat of the Dark Lord's power after all. He would just need to keep his head down for the next couple of weeks for everything to quiet down. Then, when everyone fell into the monotony of school, he could start to explore the magical castle. Because Harry was in Ravenclaw, he did not have to deal with the flying class drama that ended with both Draco and Ron having a month's detention after destroying Nevile's Remembrall and disobeying orders not to fly. With Harry's new perspective into wizard stupidity, so many things made sense now. Like why a rich pureblood would risk the stigma of being labeled a thief, or why a shy, abused orphan would suddenly jump into the limelight to return a stranger's property at the risk of his own life. Harry decided to let Ron and Draco develop their feud so they would be too busy to concentrate on him. Ron had tried a few times to insert himself into Harry's influence and claim friendship while snubbing everyone near him, while Draco remained professional and invited him to play with his group of minions. Both cared little for school and had their sights set on childish pursuits because, well, they were children. But while Draco understood Harry's need to learn about his heritage, his go-to excuse for turning Draco down politely, Ron took it as a slight. He became belligerent when he was continuously rejected in favor of studying in the library over playing a game of chess. Soon he and his half-blood cronies Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas could be heard slandering Harry about being a stuck-up pureblood. This did not really bother Harry, but he soon became aware of different looks from the half-bloods and Muggleborn of the different years and didn't want the sheep to start developing a negative impression of him. So with only the slightest bit of reluctance, as he hated Ron Weasley in the books for being a complete and utter wanker, Harry made his way over to the Gryffindor table at breakfast under the watchful gaze of the entire school. Dean and Seamus became nervous as they noticed the entire school looking at them and then paled when they heard Harry clear his throat and turned to see him standing behind them. Ron continued to shovel food into his mouth like he hadn't eaten for a week, his eating utensils discarded in favor of his hands. Ron failed to get the subtle hints that someone was behind him wanting to talk, so Harry just came out and addressed the red-headed pig directly. Ron Weasley, I hear you and your friends have been slandering me by saying I am a pure-blood extremist that hates Muggleborns. May I please know how you came to such a conclusion so that I could clear up any misunderstanding? Harry said loudly and clearly, so the now silent dining hall had no problems hearing his every word. Ron was so startled from his single-minded devotion to eating that he jumped when Harry called out from behind him. The whole school was treated to the lovely sight of half-chewed waffles falling from his open mouth onto the table beside his plate. The jealous little *T immediately turned bright red when he noticed the disgusted looks from everyone, and this only made him more prone to lash out at the cause of his embarrassment. What do you want, Potter? Don't you have some books to read with your rich friends? Ron spat out with a few additional bits of waffle. Being so startled, he had not heard what Harry had said after saying his name. I was merely wondering why you, Dean and Seamus have been slandering me. The rumors that I have overheard say that I hate anyone that is not a pure-blood noble and especially despise Muggleborns. I was curious how this misunderstanding came about and have since traced it back to you. Also, could you please swallow your food before you speak? Harry calmly replied. What's the matter? Not good enough for your pure-blood traditions? Ron replied smugly, once again missing the question and latching onto something he could use as an insult. For Harry's part, he just looked at Ron like he was an idiot. He continuously kept forgetting he was dealing with children thanks to his foreknowledge of 7 years' familiarity of everyone's character. You do realize that if you are going to bring up blood status, that you are a pure blood while I am a half-blood, right? But manners have nothing to do with blood status, even Muggles would find your manners lacking. Ron reddened further at the rebuff and continued to blurt out nonsensical insults like the uneducated and isolated 11-year-old child he was. He would have been much better at this if he had more contact with children other than his brothers. As the youngest child, Ron was always on the receiving end and had no experience dishing it out. Even Ginny regularly put him in his place. This was why Draco verbally slaughtered him at every turn. He was explicitly trained by his father how to talk and act like a noble, as it was expected of him to be better than his peers. Yeah, so what? I'm a Weasley, we don't care about stuff like that. Now, how about you shove off, slug breath? Percy had gone pale at the damage just done to the Weasley reputation and further cringed when he noticed his crush Penelope Clearwater looking at him funny. Fred and George just took it in their stride but were still in disbelief about their youngest brother's vendetta against the boy who lived. It seems that even Potter didn't know why Ron was angry at him. Yes, well, I would be happy to leave after you explain why you are spreading ridiculous rumors about me. Harry soldiered on, wanting Ron to put his foot in his mouth before his brothers could defuse the situation. What's there to explain? You always look down on everybody that isn't a pure blood. Spending all of your time in the library instead of hanging out with us. We not good enough for you, is that it, Potter? Ron happily obliged in destroying any credibility to the lies he spread. Making the best put-upon face while he sighed, Harry launched into a cutting rant that should keep this idiot away from him for good. If not, he could always supply Draco with ideas to keep him busy. First of all, once again, you are a pure blood while I am a half-blood. If anyone was discriminating, then it would be you for slandering me, a half-blood, for no reason other than I wanted to study in the library instead of playing chess with you. Second, I have just found out that I am a wizard, and so were my parents. After they were horribly murdered and I was then abducted, 10 years had passed before I even knew their names or what they looked like. Forgive me for being so selfish that I wanted to find out all I could uncover about them and my newfound heritage. And as far as me hating half-bloods and Muggleborns, I cannot believe you can be that stupid, simply because if you were, you would have died long ago for forgetting to breathe. The only person I can honestly say I dislike would be you, a pure blood. By your logic, I now hate all pure bloods. Never mind that my father was a pure blood, my mother was a Muggleborn, and that I am a half-blood, I must hate one of those groups of people simply because you say I do. Please do everyone a favor and keep your mouth closed, especially when you are eating, you disgusting bigot pig. With his rant finished, he spun around and calmly walked from the hall, his robes flaring around him thanks to Snape's spell gleaned from his mind. While not the best performance, it was certainly good enough for his supposed age and would hopefully put any blood supremacy rumors concerning him to bed. Now he just had to wait for this bout of excitement and popularity to die down so he could start doing something productive. Halloween had come and gone without incident, and Harry was a little surprised. He had thought for sure that Dumbledore would have set something in motion to test what most Harry Potter fans mistakenly believed was his protégé. Quirrell had somehow got a full-grown troll through the Hogwarts protective wards and small doors undetected by Dumbledore. His great performance even managed to fool the most powerful wizard of the age into thinking it was a freak accident. Even his most loyal minion Snape reporting the ruse was not enough to persuade Dumbledore of any wrongdoing. He was just as surprised as everyone when Quirrell turned out to be Voldemort's pawn. And if you believe that, I have some prime real estate on the Sun to sell you. It even comes with a fully automated air conditioning system. Thanks to Harry erasing Quirinus Quirrell with fire, there was no B-grade performance to interrupt the feast. But Ron had still managed to make a 12-year-old girl lock herself in a toilet and cry for a few hours, enough to miss the Halloween feast that was attended by all. It really spoke to how annoying the SJW-trained Hermione was, when the entire student body, including the prefects, her head of house and the headmaster ignored her absence. She could have been abducted, and no one would notice until the next class roll call. But at least her parents raised her as a strong independent woman that reports any transgression to authorities. She was undoubtedly independent, crying alone in the bathroom. What a winner. Harry didn't really like Granger's personality or her role in the book. He found her super whiny and judgy, ignorant for a supposedly genius that consistently researches, and very hypocritical. But that was with her parents, Dumbledore and Ron, teaching her bad habits. With his training, she will be a capable minion to take control of whatever project he gives her while not pissing off everybody she meets. There would also be no marriage to Ron, the Wizarding Village idiot. That must have involved love potions for sure. After excusing himself early from the feast, Harry made his way to the first portrait-free area and checked the Marauders' map for Hermione's location. Seeing she was still in the first-floor girls' toilet, he made his way there to start his campaign of bringing her to the dark side. As he reached the bathroom entrance, he called one of his elves that arrived holding a tray of food. Trying not to come off as a pervert, he knocked on the door hoping she would be curious enough to leave her cubicle to investigate. He didn't want any rumors to start up about how he entered the girls' toilets to peek, after all. Thankfully, after the fourth exaggerated banging of the outer door of the girls' toilet, it opened slightly to reveal a red-eyed, bushy-haired, and buck-toothed girl that was in desperate need of a makeover. The movies didn't accurately show just how much of an ugly duckly Hermione Granger really was before she became the beautiful swan. Why yes. Her timid voice sounded out. It was so tempting to deliver a fatality to her vulnerable state just because Harry hated how she became in her later years. But that would be too cruel, even for him. I thought you might be hungry. I heard that you ran afoul of the red-headed fool and have been hiding out here. You shouldn't pay so much attention to what someone who will probably fail out of Hogwarts by the third year says. Seeing and smelling a tray full of delicious food, Hermione couldn't help but swallow some saliva. She had been here for a while and was rather hungry. Come on, there is an empty classroom just down the hall. The toilet is no place to eat food. Harry continued, baiting her out of the toilet with food just like you would a wild animal. 20 minutes later, an embarrassed yet full Hermione glanced at Harry and asked the question she should have asked before accepting food from a stranger. Why are you being nice to me? We have not even really spoken before. She inquired. I know what it is like to be set upon by Ron, the intolerant Weasley, and have his cronies make fun of me. Though they have not been brave enough to continue since I called him out on it in the dining hall. But why help me? She asked, fishing for compliments to boost her self-esteem. To be honest, I just couldn't watch anymore as you socially crashed and burned. It was just so painful to see. You have so much talent but act like Ron would, ignoring everyone around you and charging in like you know best. I wondered if you would be interested in some advice that would help you become the brilliant witch I know you could be. Harry decided to go the brutally honest route. He couldn't be arsed dancing around the subject to spare her feelings. Besides, she had already been crying for hours. How much more tears could she have? What do you mean? I have been doing my best to make friends, but everyone just makes fun of me. It's just like normal school. She whined and then burst into a fresh bout of tears. It seems he should have had this discussion before she ate. Now she just had more energy to cry with, thanks to a hearty meal and a goblet of that god-awful pumpkin juice. He could only sigh and beat her around the head with logic. This would be so much easier if she was nearly killed by a troll, he thought to himself. Hermione, we don't share many classes, but based on our first meeting and from what I have heard, you come off as patronizing and bossy. When you barged into my compartment on the train, you didn't knock, you didn't introduce yourself, you just bulldozed in like you owned the joint and started questioning people. How many compartments did you do that for and what were their reactions? Not the best first impression, now was it? Then you continuously offer unsolicited advice and quotes, that while accurate and interesting, just makes you look like a pompous show-off. Next, we have your antics in class. Your constant need to raise your hand to answer every question has everyone, including the teachers, rolling their eyes at your eagerness to please. Do you think the teachers actually don't know the answer to the questions they ask and need you to tell them so they can write it down for their next class? The way you enthusiastically jump out of your seat to show everyone that you know the answer is just so painful to watch. You are smart and could easily skip a grade thanks to your memorizing the coursework after a bit of practical experience, but do you think you are the only one? Teachers ask questions to keep the students engaged and make sure the slow ones are paying attention or they shame them into listening. Harry ranted at the sobbing girl. At least she had not tried to run away yet. Harry would hit her with a leglock or curse if she tried. Sighing, he moved to sit beside her and rubbed her back until she calmed down. He didn't want to have to go through this twice because she wasn't listening. After a few minutes, she settled down to the occasional sob and finally got herself under control. Turning her splotchy tear-stained face towards him, she quietly asked, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because it would be so simple for you to change how things are. The smallest of changes would have you become one of the popular kids and a worthy companion. It is so unbearable to see you throw your potential down the drain and barricade yourself in a toilet to cry and plot your suicide." "I am not thinking of suicide," she shouted in outrage. "Well, you are showing all the signs of an emo. How was I to know if you were contemplating cutting yourself or not, just so you could feel physical pain instead of emotional turmoil or some such bullsh*t?" Harry said in an exasperated tone. He could not understand self-harm people. He would much rather physically hurt the person causing him emotional pain than inflicting it on himself. And he loved himself way too much to kill himself. He would much rather move state, country, or continent if he hated his life. But on the other hand, he didn't begrudge people the choice to top themselves, he just thought it was unfair for their loved ones. "I'm not an emo, whatever that is. I am just not feeling well." She lamely rebuffed his accusations. An emo is an overly sensitive and full of angst teenager that thinks they have it incredibly tough and that no one knows the pain they have to live with. Basically, a whiny little B***tch that needs a good beating and then dropped off in Somalia to see what a real tragic life involves. They have it so hard with their full bellies, new clothes, and safe house to shelter them from the elements, that they think about ending it all while dressing in black to show how sad and miserable they are. But that's not the point. I wanted you to hear the hard truth, so you could make some changes. And they are only small changes that would make so much difference. Harry explained. Then he stared at her for a full 5 minutes before she got the hint and asked him what they were. "Did you see what I did there? I waited for you to ask me for help." That dog **t red-headed muppet was sort of justified in his outburst because you gave him unasked for advice and made him look like an idiot. Which is easy to do because he is an idiot. Now before you object, I know you were probably just trying to help, and it was well-intentioned, but Ron didn't see it that way, did he? From his perspective, you were making him look stupid and were showing off. But if he had been the one to ask you for help, then you could have shown him how to correctly cast the spell and gain some brownie points. Not that you should, that boy will always be a jealous prat that needs a good thrashing. The same for raising your hand in class. Give it a moment so that the teacher can call out those she wants to test. If she then asks if anyone knows the answer, then raise your hand calmly and display your intelligence. You don't have to look like a chipmunk on crack so the teacher can see that you know the answer. What followed was 30 minutes on schooling the poor girl on how not to act like a target of ridicule and how to manipulate the impressionable children into liking her. To give her some credit, Hermione was a lot more mature than the majority of children her age, but she was still just a child. Her reading level might be that of a young adult, but her emotional experience was that of a 10-year-old. She just had no sense of how to relate to her peers or fit in. She was actually confused by the revelation that 11-year-olds didn't want to talk about Shakespeare or other authors of literary masterpieces. Still, after she realized that Harry wasn't there to deal the finishing blow to her self-esteem, her intellect took back the reins from her emotions. She then pulled out a pad of paper from her book bag and started taking notes. All in all, Harry was happy with the final result of his ranting, even if it did start off somewhat shaky. He was nearly going to point out that her appearance could be easily fixed by magic, but quickly stopped himself. He didn't want his ugly duckling gaining too much confidence and breaking free from his burgeoning influence. Because he was not in the Gryffindor/Slytherin flying class, Harry did not follow canon and end up on the Quidditch team when Neville broke his wrist. And while his flying class had been fun and enjoyable, Harry made sure he knew enough spells to make any accident that may occur because of faulty brooms irrelevant. Hooch may possibly be a worse teacher than Snape when it came to putting children in danger. While he liked flying, he felt no great urge to join a team and devote a good chunk of his free time to a sport that made no sense. He could understand if there was no golden snitch and was just about scoring with the quaffle, but catching a magic golden orb that broke the game and made everything else meaningless? Plus, if he hurt anyone seriously with a bludger or something, his haters could use it for a smear campaign. The slight bit of celebrity status for being a school Quidditch star would be meaningless in the long run. It certainly didn't do Canon Harry any good. Much better to put his time into something that would be productive, like training new minions. After the wake-up call Harry gave Hermione, she had been a lot more tolerable to be around. He had even arranged a 2-hour-long study session in the library each day with her so he could firmly bind her to his side as a loyal follower. Though Harry mostly used the time to write out whatever assignments he needed to do out of class since he had both Snape's and Riddle's memory of the Hogwarts curriculum, it was still a good bonding session for the awkward girl with no friends. Even though he knew that the homework counted for nothing towards his final grades, it still gave everyone the perception that he was intelligent and hardworking. Or a nerd depending on who you asked. Hermione used this time to learn how not to be a judgmental B***TCH that tattled on everyone to the teachers. Apparently, Harry's earlier advice of snitches get stitches was not detailed enough for her and needed clarification. Look, Hermione, it's fine to live your life by the book and follow the rules, but that doesn't mean that you need to make everyone else live that way. How does it benefit you to tell the teacher that Malfoy is threatening others with his father's status or that Ron thinks it is okay to bully Slytherins because they are evil? Is it the right thing to do? Sure, but now you have become the target of two bullies that the teachers would not really be able to protect you from. Sure, they can take off some house points and give them detention, but would that make the Boyle curse any less painful or the cruel words hurt any less? The system does not care about you as an individual, it is for the masses. That is why they have police forces and school staff to control those breaking the rules. The best you can hope for by sticking your nose into others' business is a pat on the back from the authorities and painful retaliation from those you informed on. Harry lectured the innocent girl. But they are in the wrong. We can't just let them get away with it. Harry sighed in exasperation. This was a chore he would much rather not have to do. He really wanted to just brainwash her and save himself the trouble, but he was afraid of Dumbledore checking her mind and finding something out. Besides, Harry loved to rant, and he had plenty of time to kill. Yes, but why is it your problem if it doesn't affect you? Say your mother secretly witnessed a man kill 10 people before he had to run away because the cops showed up. He was caught a year later, but there was no real evidence and needed your mother's testimony to put him away. No one knew she had witnessed the crime, so there was no pressure from anyone to come forward. This violent criminal was part of a gang of killers who had no respect for the police or human life whatsoever. Would you urge your mum to testify? Of course. There is no way we could leave that man free to kill again. He needs to go to jail and receive his punishment. Hermione adamantly replied. That's very admirable, and your mother would now be hailed as an upstanding citizen in the news. Unfortunately, your family now has become the target of a gang of murder hobos and now needs to go into witness protection. Both your parents have to quit their jobs, and your house is burnt to the ground in retaliation. After a trial, the man is convicted and goes to jail for the rest of his life. But his buddies are furious and swear to and kill your whole family. Now you have to spend the rest of your lives in witness protection with a meager allowance and forever limited by protocols to keep you safe. Because the press covered the story closely, your identities are exposed, and you now have to live quietly to avoid any publicity or risk being found by killers. Was it worth it to get the pat on the back from the government and then thrown away like trash? There is no way they will go in and take his friends off the streets. They are part of society too and need to get caught doing something wrong before they are jailed. Harry finished his hypothetical situation. It was the equivalent to a 5-minute lead-up to a joke that ends up having a weak as piss punchline, but from the horrified look on her face, it seems to have done the job. Unless informing on others directly involves you or your safety, the only reason you should snitch on others is for your own benefit. Like if a business competitor is cutting corners and reporting them will gain your company more work. Or if anonymously dobbying on Draco loses them enough points to win the House Cup. Never directly run to a teacher and paint yourself as a target just because it is the right thing to do. Unless of course, you are a masochist and love both physical and emotional torment. Over the next couple of weeks, Harry was glad to see that she had taken his ranting as gospel, following his suggestions to the letter. Whether it was because she had nothing to lose being at rock bottom socially or was conducting a social experiment, he could not say. Even after he read her surface thoughts, it seemed to be a mixture of both reasons. Either way, she was now not spending most of her free time crying and seemed genuinely happier. His new minion firmly in hand and gradually converting to his more pragmatic view of society, he was free to move on to his next target for re-education. Neville Longbottom was the perfect quarry as an heir to an influential noble house with no real friends, low self-esteem and a timid personality. Harry had read quite a few fanfictions in his old world that had the MC train Neville and had to agree that they chose the right target. What he didn't agree with was that they built him up into a powerful, confident and independent person that stood by their side as a friend. This is the kid, that even at his most pathetic and insecure, stood up to the idiot trio and tried to stop them from going to save the Philosopher's Stone. He even threatened them with violence without listening to the full story. No, Harry would be training Neville to follow orders, not think for himself and ruin Harry's plans with his selfish stupidity. He only tried to stop them because they would lose Gryffindor points in a meaningless contest that he barely contributed to. Really, how many points had Neville gained Gryffindor to feel so invested in the competition that he felt the need to physically fight his friends to win it? Still, even as retarded as Neville was, he is the perfect minion to be the face of Harry's pure-blood schemes. At the moment, while not bullied like Hermione, Neville was still isolated and had no friends. Ron, Dean and Seamus were way too cool to hang out with Longbottom the Squib. The perfect time for Harry to swoop in and offer his hand in friendship and subtly molding his character into a dependable minion. The timing couldn't be more perfect, as while Harry was not involved in the flying class drama, fate still seemed to want Draco to challenge a Gryffindor to a duel at midnight. Ron was only too eager to accept Draco's provocation and nominated Seamus as his second. With the time and place set, everyone dispersed except the worried Longbottom child that had tried and failed to be the voice of reason. Harry had secretly witnessed the exchange and walked over to the distraught boy after he was alone to speak some insidious comments to bring him to his side. You know that this is just a trap for Ron to be caught out after curfew, right? Not noticing Harry, Neville nearly jumped out of his skin in fright when he spoke. What do you mean? Won't he be there also if they are to duel? Longbottom managed to stutter out, not used to talking to others thanks to his grandma's terrible parenting. Draco has no intention of turning up and will most likely just tell a teacher he overheard some Gryffindors planning a prank or something. But that's not right. An honor duel is a sacred tradition that would see Malfoy lose a lot of reputation if he failed to appear. Announced Longbottom, his outrage managing to fix his nervous stutter. But there were no real witnesses other than you, and I doubt Malfoy put much faith in you calling him out when Ron and his cronies are punished. Plus, there were no oaths or penalties spoken, so it is more a schoolyard brawl than an honor duel. Draco is lucky his opposition is an idiot, or he could have been in a fair amount of trouble. Harry explained, his knowledge of wizarding laws and customs showing their worth. If Draco had tried to do this to him, he would have made sure to work some penalties into the duel and recorded it so he could blackmail the brash young Slytherin. But I can still stop it. I can let Ron know that it is a trap. Neville excitedly shouted when his brain overpowered his insecurity and the shock that Harry's words caused. Sure you could, but do you think that he will listen to you? I tell you what, let's make a bet. If you manage to talk Ron into not breaking curfew, I will help you study any class for a week. But if you can't, then you will owe me a favor equivalent to a week's tutoring. Neville's face turned thoughtful as he considered Harry's proposal. While he was a wimp, his grandmother had at least given him a noble upbringing, and a bet like this could be profitable. In the end, the stakes weren't high, and this was the most interaction he had had with a fellow student since school started, so he decided to accept. Plus, Ron couldn't be that stupid. Deal. Harry was unsure if Neville would be able to talk reason into Ron and stop him from leaving the Gryffindor common room after curfew, but it didn't really matter. The main objective had already been completed and gaining a small favor of Longbottom would just be a bonus. Harry merely wanted to introduce himself, gain a positive impression and then engineer a situation that would create more contact so he could slowly influence Neville into his minion. For a shy boy with no friends, having the chance to be tutored for a week would be second to just getting to talk to someone and make a friend. And if Ron happened to insult Neville and drive him in his direction, then that would also be a welcomed result to his initial plan. Having Neville confront Ron and publicly oppose him would only create a barrier between them, especially with Ron's already negative opinion of Longbottom. Even if Neville somehow talked sense into Ron and saved him from humiliation, the damage would already be done. Amazingly, there was no new exciting gossip of Gryffindor first years being punished for breaking curfew. Still, by the dejected look on Neville's face as he sat on the end of the bench, visibly separated from the other kids, it was clear that Ron was just not caught in the act. Which honestly amazed Harry how such a doofus could have escaped Argus Filch and his bloodhound cat. Though avoiding a squib and a cat when you had magic would be extremely easy if you had a brain. Draco had really dropped the ball on his end. Who did he know that would be willing to help him because he was obligated to and hated Gryffindors? Oh, only his godfather Severus Bloody Snape. If Snape had been in on the plan from the get-go, he would have thoroughly humiliated the rule-breaking children and then dished out the maximum punishment. Must be all that ambient magic in the air dumbing down people again. It was honestly scarier than the Dark Lord. To so thoroughly affect your mentality and decision-making, scared the sh*t out of Harry. If his personality changed, was he still him? Fair enough, he was not the greatest example of humanity, but Harry still liked how he turned out. The thought of becoming the same as Canon Draco Malfoy or Voldemort made him check and recheck his personal idiocy shield in fear. Talking the dejected Gryffindor outcast into joining him and Hermione in the library every day turned out to be even easier than he thought it would be. Neville was practically begging him to be allowed to join once Harry mentioned it. With his terrible potions class antics, it would have probably had the same result even if he wasn't lonely. It also gave Neville and Hermione a chance to become friends, them not really having interacted since she dragged him all over the train in search for his toad. Things were going nicely. There was no maniac trying to kill him like in canon, the students' fanatical interest in him had lowered to an appropriate level, and his new minions were listening attentively to any opinions or suggestions he had. Even the Ravenclaws stopped knocking on his door after he dropped a few hints that he hated to be disturbed from his only private time. Finally, after 3 months of school, Harry felt it safe enough to visit the most important place in Hogwarts without being interrupted. The Room of Requirements, otherwise known as the Come and Go Room or the Room of Hidden Things. When one of his elves popped him into the room directly, Harry was amazed at just how much junk was packed into the place. And the size of the room itself was significantly larger than you would expect from a place that was hidden on the 7th floor of a castle. It was about 70 meters wide, by 150 meters long, and was jammed-packed of all manner of items and furniture piled on top of each other. How people found anything without using magic would have to have been because of luck or plot armor. Apparently, the Room of Hidden Things had special protection that prevented a summoning charm being used in it, meaning people had to physically find what it was they were looking for. This was certainly the case when Hermione attempted to summon Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem but failed, although this may be because the diadem was a Horcrux. They actually didn't test it on anything else, which was a bit stupid. Harry pulled out his wand and cast the spell on a cloak that he saw across the room that was draped over a chair. He wanted to know all the limitations of the room. Accio cloak. The cloak knocked the chair over as it zoomed across the room to his waiting hand. Fortunately, the chair was not holding up one of the precariously balanced piles of junk. Otherwise, it would have been slightly dangerous if it started a domino effect. His misconception about one of the Room of Requirements rules debunked, Harry decided to clean it out so he could start testing out the others. But gaining the diadem was the primary goal. "Boppy!" he called. "Yes, Master," the immaculately dressed head elf asked as he appeared out of thin air. "You know that underground storage facility I asked you to prepare before I left for school? Gather a team of elves and transfer everything in this room there, and please sort it by item type. But be careful of a diadem hidden somewhere in here, it is a Horcrux and needs to be brought to me as soon as it is found," Harry commanded. Seeing his head elf staring uncomprehendingly at him, he couldn't help but clear up the misunderstanding before the eager little buggers got to work. "You are not sure of something?" Harry asked. "Ah, yes, Master." "What's a diadem?" the house elf asked. Which was fair enough, Harry had never heard of one before he read Rowling's books. It is very similar to a tiara. Seeing the continued questioning look on his elf's face, he could only sigh. Harry was not blaming the little guy for not having heard of obscure women's jewelry or knowing what it looked like. He just wished he wasn't having this conversation and that Rowena had made an artifact that wasn't gendered specific. He could hardly look manly in a diadem. It is a piece of woman's jewelry that is like a dainty crown to be worn on the head. It will have jewels on it and look like a silver circle, Harry explained. "Very good, Master. We will get on it right away," his most loyal minion enthusiastically replied before popping away. Harry looked around at all the things stacked together and wondered what he was going to do with the majority of it. Just a quick glance was enough to see that he would have no need for most of it as it was junk. Broken and damaged furniture, mostly chairs, tables, and various cabinets haphazardly stacked. Thousands and thousands of books, either in tottering piles or in bookcases. Fanged frisbees. Chipped bottles of congealed potions. Corked bottles whose contents still shimmered evilly. What looked like dragon eggshells. Several rusting swords. A massive, blood-stained axe. An enormous stuffed troll. The broken vanishing cabinet that he had the partner of from Borgin and Burke's. Hats, jewels, including a trunkful, and cloaks. Many cages in various sizes, including one with a 5-legged skeleton in it. A chipped old bust of an ugly warlock. A few heavy broomsticks. A banjo. A set of dominoes. Various metalware, including cauldrons. Various trophies. A mask. Various portraits and empty frames. Suits of armor, some disassembled. Various textiles. There really was a fantastic amount of variety in the junk stored here, and that was just what was in his immediate vicinity. If Harry didn't have an army of elves to magically manage it for him, it would have taken him ages to sort through it for anything of value. He had to know what he was looking for to summon it after all. Seconds later, 30 elves appeared and started shoving things into magically expanded trunks. Their speed and dedication was amazing to watch, so he walked over to the chair he had knocked over from before, and sat to watch the gradually disappearing junk piles. Harry wasn't sure how the magic behind the room worked and preferred not to leave until everything was cleared away. Since it was only 10 o'clock in the evening and he now wasn't always disturbed by fans, he had plenty of time to watch the magical housekeepers do their thing. But before he could get comfortable, Boppy appeared in front of him with Tom Riddle's Horcrux. The elves worked fast. Now there was only Riddle's diary, and Hufflepuff's cup left to recover for their tasty soul pieces. Harry was actually more curious about the diadem itself than the actual Horcrux, as it was said to be able to increase the wearer's intelligence. Good job, Boppy. I'm going to take care of the Horcrux and then examine the diadem. Make sure to reward your elves for their work after they finish cataloging everything and notify me of the results. Harry excitedly said as he took the Horcrux from his elf, ignoring the pathetic compulsions coming from it with his iron will. Voldemort's main soul had long since been absorbed without consequence, so Harry was eager to expand his soul once again and increase his willpower. Having an untainted magical artifact of legend would also be brilliant. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.